could the writing in 40 through 66 reflect maybe the scribe who was no less inspired, but inspired by this faith community who's doing the writing? That's
Yeah,
not unheard of, and it's not outrageous from a kind of a scientific theological
right.
perspective.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
interesting.
where I lean myself.
So let's talk about what's your favorite passage in the book of
Uh,
Isaiah?
Hands down, Isaiah 53. I have to go back to that one. I grew up in a liturgical Lutheran church, Missouri Synod as a kid, went to Lutheran parochial school. And so from my childhood, I have such fond memories of evening Lenten services the weeks before Easter. It would be dark by the time the service was over, and we would sing songs like that. One of my favorite hymns of all time, "O Sacred Head Now Wounded," the uh, music being written by Bach, and it's sorrowful and yet it's just so emotive, and it's all based out of Isaiah 53. How can you not go to that passage and surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. Just wow. Now, the Jewish people, even to this day, generally say that the servant poems, the servant passages like that, we're talking about the people of Israel, the people of God. And surely it's true that over the millennia of time, they have encountered terrible persecution, and not
Yeah,
just in the modern era with Hitler, but I mean for centuries and centuries before. So this is not uh, doubting or pushing that aside at all. But never really can we see that the people of Israel who endured such pain, that pain brought the atonement of the world.
yeah,
It did not
yeah. That
atone
part, that
sins of
part's
the
hard
world.
to connect. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny the thought of there's like four servant songs, and this
right.
passage you read of is the fourth, and it's I don't think it's necessarily invalid to interpret it as the people of God
Hmm.
uh, and what they went through, but at a certain point, it takes on a much bigger
Yeah,
and impossible for a person to fulfill,
or
and
or
then
a nation or a race of people.
yeah, or an entire nation, yeah, maybe the Israelite, the representative of that nation. If there was a short term fulfillment with the people of God, then the big long term fulfillment is the person of God.
Yeah.
Um, actually bringing atonement, which no nation can bring that.
Years ago, I had a friend, a colleague, I guess, here in Colorado Springs. He was a rabbi. He was the rabbi of the largest synagogue in our city, which wasn't huge because we're not a huge Jewish community. And he told me once, he kind of confided that in the conservative Reformed churches all follow what's called lectionary, where it's a 3-year cycle for daily and then Sunday service readings. And essentially, it's like read the Bible through in a year, but it's through 3 years. And so
Okay.
every congregation follows this. So they're all reading the same passage on the same Sunday. Well, he said that a few years before that, the conservative or whatever it was group in Judaism had eliminated or taken out Isaiah 53 from its regular reading cycle in the synagogues, in the temples. He said, quite frankly, he said, because rabbis, he said, we got tired of when that came up, that verse came up and it was read publicly, they'd have 4 or 5 people coming out of synagogue meeting and are shaking the rabbi's hand and saying, "What's the deal with that? Is that about Jesus?" These are uh,
Yeah.
nice Jewish people who haven't read the New Testament that
Right.
are hearing that passage and
Of course,
saying
a big part of being Jewish is that you're not Christian.
that kind of is a big one, that it's not Jesus. And he said, rather
Yeah,
than deal with it, they just said, let's just stop reading that one.
yeah. We did a deliverance for a young Jewish man about 3 years ago. He just was severe anxiety, depression, suicidal, and someone brought him to us, and he was willing to try anything. He had strayed
Sure.
from even his own bar mitzvah and Jewish roots,
Okay. Yeah.
and but he was willing to try anything. So here we have a couple of Christians helping him
Yeah.
in case what he's dealing with might be a spiritual warfare issue or
Right.
demonic issue. So um, we he's willing to give the Jesus thing a try, and he has an experience where
Yeah.
he is bathed in light, and it's the light of Jesus, and he can see the face of Jesus
Wow.
just smashing light on him, and he's like sobbing and shaking, and I'm like, well, what is he? Where is he? What does he look like? He says, it's in your face, and I'm thinking, oh, it's in my face. I said, well, he could have picked somebody better. And he says, no, not you. The guy here that's also praying with us, which one of our young interns. And so Jesus was blasting his presence through in the same location as this other kid,
Wow.
which was funny because I was trying to, I assumed that certainly my face would be
Right.
the
Would be
one that Jesus
the
would
very
shine
visage
through.
of Christ. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah. So, maybe that would fit Isaiah 53, not much to look at,
Not much.
but,
That's well, that was in the
but
back of my mind.
but what was interesting is he had an experience with the living resurrected Christ that really messed him up in a good way.
Yeah.
And then for him, he said that it helped him go back to the roots of his bar mitzvah and reconnect to it. And so for him, he reconnected to the Judaism of his childhood with Jesus. And so it's just interesting seeing another perspective of that full circle.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, let's go to a different passage, and we'll close with this one, which is also a prophetic passage about the coming Messiah, which sometimes Isaiah is referred to as the fifth gospel because there's so much about Jesus in it.
And there's
Uh,
so many of the New Testament writers, Old Testament quotations are from Isaiah.
yeah, quoting Isaiah constantly, and
Yeah.
and I think one of the great joys of the early church was rediscovering Isaiah and saying, now this all makes sense. And oh my gosh, that I never thought that, but oh my gosh. And here's a great example of what would make sense in retrospect, written at least, and the beauty of Isaiah, even if there was redaction, like you talked about, like maybe the school of Isaiah, you're not agreeing with that. But even if some of it was written by his disciples in a different era, 100 years later or whatever,
Right.
we know that all of it was completed well before the time of Christ. It's
and
the Septuagint, which is 150 to 250 BC.
The Septuagint, and then the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
hinted at that. No, that this stuff was clearly centuries
Yeah.
before Christ.
Yeah. So that's without question. And so the early followers of Jesus post resurrection are reading these things, and I think they're just probably the hair standing up on their neck as they're reading this. And so